Trails and Ghost Towns with Mike Roberts and Bill Barley.
Welcome to Gold Trails and Ghost Towns. I'm Mike Roberts, and Bill Barley is with me. He's our resident tour guide for ghost towns of the Pacific Northwest, BC, and the Yukon. And today we're going to be talking about a place which is in the southern part of British Columbia. And Bill, where precisely is Granite Creek?
Well, it's just east of the Coast Range, and it's in that old Tulameen, Similkameen region of British Columbia, which is steeped in placer gold history and mining history generally.
Now, what were they looking for here? Placer indicates gold. Is that what was at Granite Creek?
Originally, they were looking for gold, but they found a bonus, Mike. They found platinum as well.
And there are treasure stories, I would presume, with all there seems to be in all these places.
A couple of fascinating stories.
And some remarkable characters that you've heard of from other parts of British Columbia's history. We'll be talking about Granite Creek, Granite City, right after we come back from this break. Welcome back to Gold Trails and Ghost Towns. Bill Barley here, and we're talking about Granite Creek, Granite City. But before we got to there, really, what route did the people who were coming this way take?
Okay, most of the American miners, 1858, came up the Columbia, then branched onto the Okanagan, and then took another tributary of the Okanagan, that was the Similkameen. And they made their way up the Similkameen, and at Princeton, which was then called Vermilion Forks, they took the North Fork, which was called the Rouge or the Red. And this is now called the Tulameen.
And it looks like rough country.
It is quite rough country, and this photograph here indicates what the Tulameen looks like today. The river cutting through the center, cliffs on either side, and it stays in this very hilly, cliffy country for many, many miles, Mike.
The Chinese mined this area, but this is the interesting little twist. What we're really looking at here is one of the early whites who came into the country. Who is the fellow on the lead horse on the bridge?
Probably that's Johnny Chance. And Johnny Chance was a sometimes rustler, sometimes bad man from the United States, whose name probably wasn't really Chance, came into this area in 1885, 25 years after the Chinese had been mining the river, and discovered a creek that they were not mining, and it was called Granite Creek.
Now, we have here a yoke. This would be used by a human being.
This is a man yoke, yeah.
And you can see it's got a little padding on the shoulders, I guess, to make it a little more comfortable for him. What did he use the yoke for? And who used the yoke?
The yoke was used by the Chinese, and they would be carrying, because in certain areas, if they're working on a bench, they had to carry the gravel to water. So they would actually take that yoke, put it over their shoulders.
Give us a demonstration.
Well, like so. And that's why it's padded here, Mike. This is padding, so it'll be easier on the neck of the individual. Put it over their neck like this. There would be another equivalent of this on the other side. A bucket would hang here, another bucket would hang here, so they'd counterbalance, and they would carry their pay dirt to water. And this is a very laborious process, but the pay dirt in that river was extremely good.
Now, the Chinese mined throughout this whole area. Why didn't they mine on Granite Creek?
Well, there are several theories. My theory is that they mined all the other creeks in the area. There's no doubt about that. When the white miners came in 1885, they found Slate Creek had been worked, and Boulder Creek, and Eagle Creek, and Bear Creek, and Champion Creek, and Collins Gulch. All of them had been worked except for Granite. And the probable reason is the Chinese, I think, probably had prospected Granite Creek. But Granite Creek is sensitive to very, very high water, especially because it comes down a narrow draw. So if it rains in the upper part of Granite Creek, that creek comes up very quickly. And if a Chinese had been caught there, one of their prospectors, he probably would have been drowned. I think that one of the Chinese, there was a fatality, a Chinese fatality on Granite Creek. They walked away from the creek because the creek they considered was Badwa.
Badwa?
Yes, it was evil spirits, and the Chinese were kind of prone to shy away from creeks.
Gold wasn't enough to lure them past that again?
Evidently not then.
That would have to be one of the only explanations, because being in that country, it's certainly accessible. There's no mystery about it. It would normally be explored.
And it's the major tributary of the Tulameen beyond Princeton.
All right. Let's take a look at some of the other old photographs we've got of this particular region, because there's really such a tremendous story to this. This is a really old shot and developed about the, what, 1885, 1890, something
yes,
like
it's
that?
probably early 1890s. Shows Granite Creek on the right-hand side. And it's typical of one of the early mining towns of British Columbia, log cabin structure and so on. And this shows some detail of the town itself. This was probably taken about 1895, shows the Caribou Hotel, or the Caribou House, and this is one of 3 or 4 hotels in Granite City at the time.
It wasn't really a city. That was just a name it was given. It was never actually gazetted as a city.
No, because it didn't last that long, Mike, but you must realize that Granite at this time was the 5th largest city in British Columbia.
They really packed them in. This is a bit overexposed shot, but if you watch for roof lines and stuff, there are buildings just piled into this little valley.
Sure, 2 main streets in Granite, and there were over 1,000 people here at the height of the rush, which was 1885 and into 1886.
The workings, this pit, there are all sorts of things that you can learn from a shot like this. What's the man got suspended from that tree overhead? Do you know what is being shown in this shot?
Well, the shot itself is not as distinct as it should be, but it shows that they have about 25 feet of overburden here, and they have to lift some of those rocks, so the tripod's in here. There's also a car for carrying out some of the...
That's the wood rail line.
The pay gravel, right, and they would be dumping that into a sluice box and then running the gravel down through the sluice to recover both platinum and gold.
Look at the size of the rocks that I mean, these are real river boulders that are there.
Yeah, this is an old run, you can tell by the size of the boulders. Not unusual in the Tulameen country.
It must have been tough country to work.
Oh yeah, this is another shot. This is of Granite Creek itself, probably 1890s, and here they flumed part of the creek away. They've got a dam up there, and this is typical of the operations to tap the bedrock on the bottom of the creek, some of which they could reach, Mike, and some of which they could not.
The abacus, again, the Chinese used this extensively.
Yeah, they did.
Now, this is a place where a minor treasure event comes into play.
Yeah, there's rather an interesting story here, and the story is this, is that in the 1890s and early in the 1880s, both the Chinese kept their platinum. The white men were inclined to throw it away. And in the late 1880s, a miner called Johansen came into this country and came across a very, very good patch of ground. But in so doing, he picked up a lot of what we call white man's gold or poor man's gold, and it was platinum unknown to him. They were getting 25 cents a pound. Well, he didn't think 25 cents a pound was good enough, so he stashed all his platinum, several hundred ounces, in an old bucket, in a pail. And in 1895, he heard of another rush on the Kootenays, hard rock rush. He left Granite Creek, but before doing so, he hid or cached the bucket somewhere within sight of his cabin door. And now what happened to him in the Kootenays, we don't know, but he never returned to Granite. And so somewhere within the site of Johansen's old cabin, which no longer stands, because there are only half a dozen buildings left in Granite City, or Granite Creek, is the old platinum cache. And there's no doubt that this did occur because there have been several other minor caches of platinum found in the region, right from Britton Creek right down.
The theory being that if it was heavy enough to be like gold, it probably should be kept because it might be worth something somewhere.
That's right. It was a noble metal, and it was almost the same specific gravity as gold, and but he never did return.
So what's platinum go for an ounce these days?
Well, the platinum there is about 72% pure, so they'd probably only get a little over $600 an ounce at the present time in Canadian funds. That would be worth probably, if there's 300 ounces there, would be very close to $200,000 in the old bucket, if somebody hasn't already picked it up.
That's the thing. I mean, we know, we've heard the legend, and of course nobody would say, I've got the cache.
Not too many, probably.
All right. Then there have been other caches. There could still be more.
Yeah, there could be indeed.
Okay, and they're still mining platinum out of the area.
Definitely.
These characters, now the people of the time, you mentioned Johnny Chance already, but some of the businessmen of the time are pictured in this shot. The man on the left's got some woolly chaps.
Yep.
They all look like pretty rakish types, except for the portly guy third from the left.
Yeah, this is almost certainly Edgar Dewdney, who was one of the original builders of the Dewdney Trail, along with Moberly. And he had mining interests in the Similkameen region, and they are standing. This shot is probably taken very close to Princeton itself, which is right on at the confluence of the Similkameen and the Tulameen.
Now, the name Dewdney, you've already mentioned the Dewdney Trail. Is he the contractor who built it?
Yes, he's one of the two.
And Walter Moberly was his partner?
That's correct.
Did they make lots of money on that? Was that like a Crown Corporation today?
It really set the scene for Dewdney's later successes in life. He became quite well known, one of the most well known of the British Columbians.
Okay. There are some other characters. This is a man of the cloth.
Yes, this is the saint of the goldfields, really. It's Father Pat, Henry Irvin. He was called Father Pat. He's riding an old horse called Tom here, and he is armed, of course. And this is just prior to his death. He was considered by many people to he was the miners' priest. He was well loved by all the miners, whether or not they were religiously inclined.
What endeared them to him?
Well, he was a very strange guy. He was an Irishman. He was had a quick temper, flash temper, and occasionally would come to blows with individuals who perhaps didn't agree with his particular philosophy.
But still, that endeared him. I mean, he was
sure.
straightforward. He was honest, was he?
Very definitely.
He didn't line his pockets with their gold?
No, very, very fine man.
And why was he armed? I mean, did all men have to be armed at that time?
Well, and probably in Father Pat's case, he didn't have to be armed. He'd be hunting meat and feeding himself as he went along.
The next shot is probably one of the most recognizable characters in British Columbia history, who actually came from around this area.
Oh, sure he did. Yeah, this is Bill Miner, and his
that
brother
wasn't his real name, I understand.
Well, no, it isn't, and it's debatable, but he was a Georgian, and his brother, so-called brother, Jack Budd, was in a ranch just outside of Princeton. And Miner knew Granite Creek, had been there, and frequented the area, and eventually got caught for the robbery of ducks and went to prison for some years until he escaped. And this was the guy who originated the phrase, hands up.
Now, that shot there, would that have been just a little postcard or a photograph, a family photo, or would that be a mug shot from his...
That's a mug shot after the hold-up at Ducks. And, but you can see that, a very interesting man, you see. He started robbing stagecoaches when he was 16. And he jumped onto a stagecoach, and before that time there were several phrases. But he couldn't think of what to say, so he said, hands up. And much to his amazement, the driver of the stage put his hands up, and a new phrase was coined.
And was he a bad man? I mean, there's a Robin Hood theory about him, too.
Yeah, there is. But I think I talked to people who knew him, who are now deceased, and they kind of liked him. He was very courtly individual, well-spoken, soft-spoken, never killed a man in his life that they know of, wounded several, and amassed a considerable amount of money over almost half a century of robbing stagecoaches and then trains.
Yeah. The leg irons, which we've already seen on a couple of shots here, do you think Bill ever wore these?
I would doubt it whether he ever wore those, although those came out of the Princeton Granite Creek area, and but they're typical of the leg irons of the time, and you did not walk very rapidly. You certainly didn't run with those and when you were ironed and cuffed.
They look substantial enough. Did anybody ever get away after these had been put on?
I can only think of one case in that immediate area where a guy got away with, he was cuffed and ironed and managed to throw himself through the back window of a train, landed on his feet on the tracks, hobbled off into the bush, and knew somebody in the immediate area, and they managed to sever the irons from him. Eventually he was recaptured, but not at that particular time.
How did you come to acquire these fine set of leg irons?
Well, they're out of the Canada West collection, and I collected them many years ago, probably about 25 years ago, Mike.
Very wise, judicious buy back then.
Yeah, I guess it was. It's part of our history.
Right. Additional material. We've talked about a little bit about businessmen when we looked at Mr. Dewdney, but there are other businessmen who made their living at this time. This is one of the buildings, last surviving buildings of Granite Creek. Is it still standing today?
Well, actually, the wall closest to us, which is on the right-hand side, has just caved in last year, unfortunately. This is the old Cook general store in Granite, and it stood for many, many years, and it's a shame. It could probably still be resurrected, but it's not in very good condition just now.
Must have been quite a structure. The 2 stories, obviously, so an architectural feat for a log building.
Oh, yeah, he bought platinum and gold.
F.P. Cook.
Yeah.
This building was born from an apparent additional find.
Yes, a later operation where they felt the old Swan Channel felt they had got another run of Granite Creek, and so they had a mining operation just west of Granite Creek itself. Didn't last that long, didn't make much money.
This shot was taken in, what, the early 70s?
That was taken in the early 70s. That building is gone now, Mike, unfortunately.
Would just fall down or torn
Just fell down. Yeah.
This is still around, though, I think.
Yeah, this building is in Granite City itself, and it's still there, and typical of the log construction of most of the buildings in Granite.
Now, there's not standing headroom there. They dug the floor out on the inside.
That's right, they did.
Saving on logs there. And is pretty well all these buildings still there for Granite today?
Just about all of them. One has disappeared that shows, but this is typical of the flat upon which Granite stood, and of course nobody lives in the center of town itself. It's all vacant. It is truly a ghost town.
Now, the hillsides that you see going up behind there, anything special about that country up there?
Well, yeah, there's an old town called Blakeburn, which is way up in the hills, and the old Blakeburn accident took place there. But that's a different story in a later era, really.
Okay, we do have a couple of really remarkable treasure stories to tell here, and so what we'll do is take a break, come back in a second, and look at treasure stories from Granite City. Welcome back to Gold Trails and Ghost Towns. We've already had one treasure story. I like the treasure story of the platinum cash, but
Yeah.
cold hard cash is kind of an interesting story as well.
Yeah, this one concerns banknotes, actually, old banknotes.
Yeah.
And in 1964,
1964.
a man called Don Coombs came into Granite, kind of down on his luck, had a wife and a number of small children, and came onto the flat deciding to rework some of the old diggings, and saw a cabin on the flat, and this is the cabin pictured here, and decided he would make this a temporary home. And as he went into the cabin, he began to clean it out, Mike. And when he cleaned it out, he was throwing small pieces of paper out the door that were wrapped in twine. They're actually kind of an oil paper wrapped in fishing twine, and threw a number of these packages out the door. Finally, his curiosity got the better of him, undid the fishing twine, looked inside, and there were some old banknotes. And I mean old banknotes, 1890s, Bank of Montreal, Bank of Nova Scotia, all the old defunct banks of Canada. And there were $5 bills and $10 bills and ones and twos. He was astonished. Looked through all through the cabin, under the oil paper, under the table, and all over the place. Came up with $1,198 in old bills. Now, he wasn't sure at that time, this is 20-odd years ago, whether they were worth anything. So he took them down to the Bank of Commerce in Princeton, and he presented them to the manager, and the manager looked them up in his book at that time and said, yes, this is worth face value, this is worth face value, and so on. And he had $1,198 in face value, traded the bills in for that sum. And surprisingly enough, the bank manager didn't know how valuable they were either, because they're very valuable collector's items.
So weren't numismatists around at the time? I mean, you collect coins and face value. What do you think they'd have been worth as a collector's item or historic value?
Even at that time, probably somewhat over $10,000.
$10,000.
And more now, depending upon the date, depending upon the bank, and depending upon the denomination and the condition of the bills. And these bills actually were sent on to Penticton. And I was informed by some of the bank clerks in Penticton that they had some old bills in from Princeton. And I said, oh yeah, I'd like some of those. Where'd they come from? They said, oh, I don't know, some old prospector, I guess. So I bought a few of these bills at face value. And eventually, I traded them at face value again to a collector in the Okanagan, and unwittingly didn't know that they'd come from the old treasure shack. And of course, I learned about this many years later.
And so kicked yourself for trading them away.
Well, yes, because they had historic value.
Are they at all intact at this stage?
Well, they're pretty well spread out, except for the ones I had, and they're in the hands of a collector in the Okanagan.
Tremendous. There are still riches in this area, too. I mean, as much as the Chinese went through the country and mined it, followed by the white prospectors who came through and mined it, and there were how many gold rushes here? Because this was not just one run.
Well, there was the original find, which was 1858 or 59, and then the Chinese worked it for 25 years. Then there was the Granite Creek rush, and then in the 1890s, considerable activity until granite itself was burned in 1907, heavily burned, so that not many of the buildings survived. But then the depression of the 1930s, and now some miners going back into this area to rework some of the benches and looking for old channels.
And like the man who went in the 60s to look for some treasure, I mean,
Sure.
you know, just down on his luck. And you're in there right now, and this shot shows you how much gold can be obtained out of this neck of the woods right now. How much is there?
Well, 3 pounds, 1/2 ounce of gold and platinum. The platinum doesn't show.
3 pounds.
That's 1 day.
3 pounds, 1/2 ounce of gold in 1 day.
Yes, gold and platinum in 1 day. And that's on, we're just down from Granite Creek, a couple of miles downriver on the Tulameen from Granite Creek, and an old bench that the Chinese knew about. And there's an old back channel on the bench, which is, by the way, very difficult mining, Mike, but fascinating area to, because when you come across an old tertiary channel, you know that you're in an original run.
What's 3 pounds of gold worth?
Well,
I mean, this is
gold is weighed in troy weight, so
Yeah.
each ounce is, there are 12 ounces to the pound, but each ounce is more than a avoirdupois or a standard ounce, so that a 1 pound of troy weight is a little over 14 ounces of standard weight.
money. How much?
Well, about a little over $20,000, 21 or 22,000.
And this was all is still being mined after all these other people have already gone through.
Yes, but you must realize that the easy part of the river has been done. The Chinese gleaned and were the best miners in the business, Mike, so that when they went over the river, they wing dammed a lot of the Tulameen, which is a shallow river.
Wing
so they
dammed.
Wing dammed it. They put a dam out and then worked behind in the slack water behind the dam, then put another dam just down, and do that with rocks, working their way down the river on both sides of the river. Yeah. But most of the old gold channel seems to come on the south side. There seems to be an old ancient channel coming down the south side of the Tulameen from about Granite Creek right down to Princeton, and it's indicated in 3 or 4 different spots there.
Is it all staked? I mean, you've obviously staked it in order to have your mining operation work.
The river is essentially staked from Princeton right up to Champion Creek, which is about as far as the gold goes. Although a few people have claims beyond that, they're not in the real gold area.
Is it sort of anomalies or unusual deposits, or do you think that there's some substance left there? Obviously, I wouldn't call 3 pounds of gold not substantial, but is that just an unusual little pocket?
No, out of that particular area, there are about 518 ounces, as near as we can tell, came out of a space about 50 feet by 42, which is very, very rich by today's standards. Bonanza ground by old standards, but not rich bonanza ground like they had in the Yukon.
Why wasn't it found? I mean, is it just too hard? Because you were telling me that you found a boulder in there just as big as our room here.
Yeah, we found several boulders that weigh 20, 30, 40 tons, and that was part of it. There's a lot of overburden on it, Mike, and the channel is deep. It's down to 50-odd feet, and of course we have water problems there too. You're down actually below the level of the river in certain parts of that channel.
So there's still gold, but it's getting harder and harder to get your hands on all the time.
Yeah, it's difficult to mine now. The easy mining is gone, and now it becomes a very, very hazardous operation.
Well, how do you pick your way through river boulders that weigh a couple of 100 pounds apiece, and there are thousands of them?
Well, you usually use a hoe, and the hoe just takes the boulders out of there, and then you work right down to bedrock itself. And in this country, practically all the gold and platinum is right on bedrock.
Some of the stories of Granite Creek. And next week on Gold Trails and Ghost Towns, we're going to visit another part of the country Bill knows well, Camp McKinney. See you next time on Gold Trails.